Namaste, welcome to Ahimsa Conversations live discussions. Today we will be meeting with Nisha Anand. Yeah, it's live now. So today we'll be meeting with Nisha Anand, who is the CEO of Dream Core, and she has done some amazing work on conflict resolution and on different ways in which to reach out to whoever you feel is the other. देखिए, जीवन में हम कई ऐसी विडंबनाओं का सामना करते हैं जिसमें हमें लगता है कि कोई हमारा विरोधी है, या कम से कम जिससे हमारा बहुत तीव्र मतभेद होता है। और आज के समाज में तो हम हर मोड़ पे इस बात को देख रहे हैं कि कैसे मतभेद के कारण लोग तो मारने पे उतर आते हैं। तो निशा आनंद कुछ ऐसा काम करती हैं अमेरिका में, जिससे मैं मानती हूँ हमें बहुत कुछ सीखने को है। तो वो अभी थोड़ी देर में हमारे साथ शामिल होंगी इस सेशन में कुछ मिनटों के बाद। तो जब तक हम उनके आने की इंतजार करते हैं, क्योंकि हमने उनको 9 बजे का समय दिया है। तो let us watch the snippets episode from Nisha's episode of Ahimsa Conversations. Thank you, Intakab. Can you please play the video now? Nisha Anand का snippets का episode from Ahimsa Conversations.
Rajni ji, while we are just setting it up, if you could talk more about Nisha ji, we are just yes,
sure. Acha, Nandini, we are not recording yet, dear. Can somebody please, Intakab or Nandini, can you please? Yes, thank you.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to this episode of Ahimsa Conversations Live. Today we are meeting with Nisha Anand, who is the CEO of Dream Core. Nisha Anand अमेरिका में पैदा हुई और पली बड़ी, हालांकि उनके जो पेरेंट्स हैं, उनके माता पिता जो हैं वो हिंदुस्तान से गए, और अमेरिका में वो बहुत सक्षम एक कार्यकर्ता हैं जो अनेक प्रकार की तनाव और मतभेद की परिस्थितियों में लोगों को आपस में वार्तालाप और डायलॉग के थ्रू समस्याओं के हल ढूंढने के वो प्रयास में लगी हुई हैं। और वो इस प्रयास में बहुत छोटी उम्र से लगी हुई हैं, जबकि वो कॉलेज की स्टूडेंट थी। आज वो ड्रीम कोर एक बहुत बड़ी एनजीओ है, उसकी वो सीईओ है। She is the CEO of Dream Core, a very large organization that works with youth in America on different dimensions of both justice, social justice, and overcoming of violent situations. So we are looking forward to meeting Nisha again. She has been on Ahimsa Conversations earlier, and we will now play the snippets episode of Nisha's conversation on Ahimsa platform. So thank you, Nandini. Can you please play the snippets video from Nisha's Ahimsa conversation? Thank you.
Actually got involved in a lot of nonviolent disobedience work later in high school and then in college. And I worked on a lot of causes. And I studied nonviolent, there's no one more prolific in terms of writing than Gandhi. Studied a lot of other theorists in college and really felt like this was something me and my views could use and learn from on the left, because I was in the streets and we were protesting and locking ourselves to buildings and causing a big scene outside of the White House or outside. I was a vegetarian. I'm still a vegetarian, but we had a protest outside the circus where there was animal abuses, and I locked myself in the center of a three-ring circus by the neck. And I remember when I locked myself by the neck, this was one of the first arrests. I was pretty young, and there's thousands of people coming to the circus. And I remember that moment, once we were locked, the keys were thrown away. I wasn't going anywhere. And I turned to the 6 or 7 people locked with me, and I thought, we're ruining these children's nights. And that, for the first time, was dissonance in my head, that not every tactic and strategy there is the right thing for the time. There hadn't been education. Those folks didn't know why we were there. There were kids who had no say. They were really just coming for a night of entertainment. Their parents might have known better. And that's when I really into the idea of escalation of tactics, that you really have to start the first part, which is the conversation, which is really understand where each other's coming from, find that common ground to talk about the common pain that we all share to move an issue forward. I actually started in college this conference. It was called National Conference on Civil Disobedience, where I wanted to bridge academia with activism. So I went to the Free Burma Coalition. A bunch of us went. We talked to people in and then on the border regions in ref camps. We actually crossed the border and sometimes inside the rural camps of a lot of the ethnic minorities who had fled in particular. And we went into Myanmar. We hit out very small leads, the size of business cards, and they said, "We are your friends from around the world. We support your hopes for human rights and democracy." But in a military dictatorship, that is illegal. We didn't make our film. All 18 of us were arrested. I didn't know at the time. And we only spent about a week in jail. We had a sham trial. We were sentenced to 5 years and then deported the next day. Now, of course, I didn't know any of this happening, but I knew enough. I had studied enough that fear wasn't an option in that moment, that I knew however long I was in there, I couldn't present fear, no matter what I was feeling. I really had to stay grounded in the people I had met. I needed to stay confident in who I was and that this was something worth fighting for. The head of the Human Rights Commission in our Congress was a congressman named Smith from the state of New Jersey, and he's a Republican. And he flew all the way to Thailand to try to get us. He used his power as a Republican, and in the US, we're extremely divided. Republicans and Democrats, and me always being someone for social justice has always been far, far, far to the left. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe that somebody that identified as a Republican was going to come across the country because he believed in us and he wanted us out. And he also had been speaking out against the human rights abuses in Myanmar for a long time. And I shared a plane ride with him home. And I remember thinking as a young activist, I'd sit to him and question him on all the policies I disagreed with. These things, I decided there was too much in common. I spent time about that. The human rights situations where we had common ground. I do think it's time for common ground. Time to reach across the aisle so we can come to a moderate solution, but reach across the aisle to the other people suffering who have different views than us. We're suffering from the same things, from a bad economy, from this divide and conquer and pitting each other against each other. We're all suffering from that, but we can't seem to bridge that divide. And so I think that's necessary. It's more human conversations than just resistance of the authoritarianism and racism of the last few years. We passed a historic piece of legislation, the First Step Act. It was the largest criminal justice reform legislation in a generation. We've seen an 18% decrease in the federal prison population since when I started and now. And that's huge.
That's huge.
Huge. We haven't seen, we had been in a tough on crime, incarcerate everyone you can for a long time. And now we're seeing that decarceration because of that ability to cross the aisle, find common ground, and really keep the people in mind who need it most. The people who are locked away on these long sentences for no reason. How do we bring them home? I can't say it enough. Hurt people hurt people. So I know, although our pain not equal, I know that white supremacist has something painful in their past. Something has hurt them to be able to hurt us. I know it. It might be extreme. It's the discovery. And I think if we can hang in the conversations and discover that, you can move all sorts of things.
Thank you so much. We will now, there's Nisha, lovely. Hi Nisha, welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome again to the Ahimsa Conversations platform. Thank you so much for making time for this live episode. We just rewatched your the snippets episode from your conversation. Is there anything that you would like to say first as an opening remark before we get into the conversation? And then I'll introduce our friends who are here.
Yes, well, good. It's morning for me.
For you, it's morning. Good morning.
Yes, I just sent my kids off to school. I have a son that's in high school. He's just about 17, and my daughter is 14. And it's a heavy day here in the States. Yesterday, there was a school, what we call now, we have a word for it, school shooter or a school shooting, where a 18-year-old went into one of the elementary schools and murdered 19 children. We have a huge problem with gun violence in this country, but we also have a huge problem right now in mental health crisis, which is something that isn't talked about enough anywhere in the world. And here, where we have, a lot of services, we're not understanding what our children are going through. It's really hard. So my heart is heavy today and sending the kids off to school. And it's sad that this is the state of the world that we're in. And I know it's not just here, but Good morning, good evening. Sorry to start it on that downer, but that's where my
all of us.
That's where my heart is right now.
And I mean, though we are very far away physically, I think all of us are thinking of that horrific incident and its repetitive nature. I have seen so many statements, since morning by different public figures who are expressing, I think, grief and a sense of desperate helplessness. So I think we are all in the same boat, Nisha. We could tell you many stories of things that happen here. But I think today, since we have only half an hour with you, let's focus on there's so much that is creative and, forward-looking in the work you do. So I'm hoping we can focus on that. But very quickly, I would like to introduce Akriti Bhatia and Nandini and Intaqaf, who are members of a very interesting group here. It's an audiovisual group called Paigam, and they will all say something about themselves in a bit. I just wanted to get things rolling here. And I'll only ask you this one question, and then I'll ask the others to come in. What do we do, Nisha? How are you dealing with this situation today? Because actually that was the first question on my mind also, that there are sometimes situations when dialogue seems impossible. For example, with this shooter. So what do we do? How do we still hold on to the deep value of the importance of dialogue, and yet how do we be real? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, please.
I think that you said what is so important in combination is holding on to the value of dialogue and being real. In fact, real dialogue, especially across difference, can't happen unless you are real. You have to come to the conversation authentically who you are. And you can count on me to bring a few things into the conversation. We do a lot of work here across divides. And just like here, as in India, there is toxic polarization that is increasing violence, increasing hatred, and making people believe that there's no way to come back together. But we know that there have been moments in history where you can come back together, where you can have a unity of purpose, where this common pain of feeling so divided and living in fear and hatred, that pain can lead to common purpose and bring us back together. But I do think it starts with dialogue, and it starts with listening, really, truly listening deeply. And it's hard to do sometimes, but if I'm the person committed to dialogue with someone that seems unmovable, I have to just listen. And I have a few tips I can share that I've been practicing a lot lately.
Please do share. Yeah, yes.
One of the things I always try to do right now is find a place of agreement, any place of agreement. And an example I use here in this country is a big debate around masks. If you wear a mask or you don't wear a mask at the height of COVID. And the two sides could not, it seemed like if you were, progressive, liberal on the left, Democrat in this country, you wanted everyone to wear a mask. And if you were conservative, Republican on the right, you thought masks were stupid and we shouldn't mandate them and it's nobody's business. And if you said anything, if you said one, you were in this group, one, you were in the other group. Now, there's a million problems like this, which are this group, that group, and it doesn't make sense. How did that happen? And so no one could have a dialogue. And I just listened. I happen to have parents on my son's baseball team who have very different politics than I do. And they said, it's really hard to breathe. I don't like to wear it because it's hard to breathe. I can agree with that and not diminish my view that you should still wear them. So I find that place of agreement. You're right. It is hard to breathe. It does suck. Or another parent like, oh, my kid's getting pimples and they're already really insecure. And now they have pimples all over their face from this mask. And it's been a hard year. That sucks. That's terrible. You're right. That doesn't change who I am and my values, that I do think wearing a mask helps protect people, right? I can have a conversation and agree. But right now we feel like if we're talking to someone who has a different idea about a policy, we can't agree with anything they say, even if it's reasonable. And in fact, that's the fight we're having on gun control. Are you actually against having a background check on a gun? Like, why would you not want to know if someone's committed a crime before you sell them a gun? But it's gotten to this point where I am pro-gun, all gun rights, absolutely no regulation. And you have people that are like a ton of regulation, and all of these people are absolutely crazy. There's obviously some in between. And so we have to listen for agreement first and listen for understanding. If you can find the point of agreement and say it, I agree, it opens up an entirely different conversation after that. The dialogue is then they're also looking for a place of agreement. It's unexpected. It's that same moral jujitsu that we talk about here. It's unexpected to agree, see what happens afterwards. And you're not lying. You're actually being also more authentic and more truthful and more real. And I think that's just one small trick. Listen deeply and find that place of agreement before thinking of anything you want to say.
Yeah. And I think also, in a sense, while honoring the pain that all the players in the situation may be experiencing, not letting that pain overwhelm you.
Yeah.
That is very difficult, I realize. And especially in the situation that you are in this today, your morning in the USA with that tragic incident yesterday, it is very difficult, to not feel overwhelmed by the grief and the anxiety.
Yeah.
As you said, this morning, parents across the US have had to have the courage to send their children to school. And actually, in a sense, that shared anxiety also is a common ground. It is a common thread.
Yes,
If
it,
we can
it
only,
should be,
yes, yeah,
we should be able to hold each other in our pain. I think when you grieve with somebody, you're able to then grow with somebody. And we say that a lot at my organization. Common pain can lead to common purpose, and common purpose can lead to a common project. And I think there's a common project right now across the world, which is coming together and healing across divides.
Bilkul. Absolutely. Akriti, would you like to come in here with any thoughts, any questions for Nisha? Akriti is a young activist, Nisha, who is the moving force behind this great audiovisual group, Paigam, who are our partners in doing the live events. Please, Akriti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rajni ji and Nisha. Thank you so much for your very enlightening thoughts and also deep anxieties that we all share. Thank you for highlighting these very important issues. Um, just to quickly talk about Pegam, we are actually a network of scholars and activists, and we focus on media advocacy and action research. I also teach in Delhi University. And one question that really, I'm not too sure how directly it relates to the recent violence incident that we're talking about, but I somewhere feel that you can still deal with individuals who are actually committing crimes and perpetrating hate. But how do we actually deal with the structural and systemic issues of violence, right? So something like state repression.
Yeah.
Even in your snippets that we watched in your previous, you also mentioned how false cases were slapped. And for activists like us who we are trying to deal with such situations, how do we be hopeful in a situation where the entire state apparatus is actually taking up characteristics that are increasingly violent? So
Yes.
this is one of the things that is really troubling me, and I'm hoping to hear from you on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Akriti.
I have my organization here, I have 65 staff people, and I feel like I often have to give this answer because some days it is really hard. And right now it is very hard to be human. The last few weeks, the last few months, the last few years have been particularly difficult. And the increase in state sanctioned violence, the increase in the different, I'd say the move towards authoritarianism around the globe. And it's hard to be human and wake up and persevere. I am an optimist, and I believe the world will change. One, I've seen it. We know the stories that states and governments and the people in those positions does change. There is a possibility to reach a tipping point when love and unity do outpace fear and division. We've seen it happen in time, but I'm not just an optimist because I know it's possible. I feel optimistic because I myself am determined, and I want my entire staff to be determined. I want my children to be determined because I firmly believe we create the future. Everything we do today creates the future. And if I am determined to make it better than the past, if I am determined to flip the way the state is operating, then I know the future is possible that I'm dreaming of. And for us in the US, we do a lot of work with our government in terms of passing new laws and bills and legislation to try to change that. But I also know it's a long game. When you have corrupt politicians and you have a political system which it is impossible to switch who's in office, it becomes a little harder. But the human spirit, what we work on changes it. So I don't know the exact point in which where you need to apply pressure to flip what's happening there. But there are a few, and I'm glad that you're in media and media advocacy, because I think it's the stories that speak to the heart that change the way people think. That type of cultural shift, the belief in who we are as a people and who we can be, that's told through media. It really is. The stories that rise to the top tell us who we are. And right now, every story getting covered is about division. All of the stories you hear are how bad this group is, how good this group is, that's what's getting covered, and that's what's telling us who we are. But what I know when I talk to people on the individual basis is that's not who they feel they are. They're out of sync with that. You see the division, we're more divided than ever. But you also, at least the polls here in the US, and I believe this to be true in India, people are yearning for it to end. The majority of people do not want that. They're just the quieter ones, or they haven't been able to break through in the media, or they are scared to say, hey, I think this is kind of stupid, because then they get shamed and put in the other group, and in some cases killed, ostracized. So we haven't made it possible for people to come out and say, hey, I'm part of the middle who thinks there's more nuance to this conversation and wants to see a change. Or I'm from this side, like I am this side, and I believe that this side isn't bad and isn't wrong, right? We have to make that possible. And I do think that media plays a big role in that. And I don't know if I knew how to make the good stories catch on, I could change this world. So I would keep experimenting with that, testing it. How do I say this in a way that people start, retweeting and sharing, and which ones aren't more infectious, and then just keep doing it over and over again. Because I do believe there's more people who want to be together than tear us apart. They're just being silenced right now, or too scared to do something.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, just wanted to say that I mean, that's an experimental, ongoing thing of seeing how stories are infectious, but definitely Nishaji's optimism is infectious indeed. So thank you.
And in a sense, Nisha, this is exactly what the Paigam team is doing. And yet, I think, to just reinforce what Akriti was saying, I think all of us are anxious that the voices of humanism seem less organized than, or have less visible impact. And I think visible is the important word here, than the forces of darkness.
Yeah.
Because as you said, and as Akriti also said, the superstructure seems to support, or at least, allow the forces of darkness to hold the ground. And I think, therefore, the situation we are in now, and it's not a new situation, I think this has played itself out in many phases of history, is how to keep the faith in the importance of the individual action while struggling to build the collective.
Yes. We have yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's a really good question. And I've been thinking about change. No matter how many times you tell the story, it's never just one person or one movement or one group. There is an entire ecosystem of people trying to move the country forward. It is the people who are doing the direct service, feeding and housing and doing all of the direct service work that needs to happen. That's an important part, as is the activist on the streets, making noise, making sure people can't ignore it, as are the people working on electoral races and changing the politicians, as are the people doing the bridge building work and the dialogue work in the media. All of that is one ecosystem, and we often see ourselves as different, as our strategy is the best strategy, join our strategy. That's also quite divisive. So I think, one, just on our own side, the people working towards good have to see ourselves as a very diverse fabric of folks that actually work together more than we do. And we have to allow people to try the different strategies, because I think that also on the side of progress, it is also hard to come out, at least here in this country, and say, I want to build bridges. One of the biggest examples we have is we worked on passing this one law in our Congress that was going to reform the criminal justice system here. We have a very corrupt and problematic prison system here. And we knew to pass this bill in our Congress, we had to have Republicans, the other party, on our side. There's no way to get it passed, any bill right now in our Congress, if you don't have people from the other party. You have to bring them in or it won't pass. But we had people on the left really shame us publicly about doing that. Why are you talking to Republicans? They're coming at it for a different reason. You're just being used. You're going to let them win. Every type of possible argument stopping us from getting this done from our people, from the people who are part of my social change ecosystem on the side of progress. And that is very strong too. Don't work with the other side to get something done. No, in fact, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the only thing that works. I am going to have a better piece of legislation. I'm going to have a better idea if I bring in voices who think differently than me. That's been proven, it's proven in nature, it's been proven in history. And I even can tell it to you now, where we're trying to work on climate change. And if I were to dream of a policy about climate change, just from where I sit, I live in California, so I would talk about fires, I would talk about drought, I would talk about electric vehicles. But if I go to the middle of our country and talk to farmers who are on the front lines of climate change, they would have a whole different set of ideas about what to do and how to tackle it. So you have to have that diversity of thought in order to have the greater good. So yeah, as an individual, I can bring an idea to the table, but a collective is actually people I don't even know, or people who I perceive to be on the other side are going to come at that, are going to come to make that law in a very different way. They're going to put very different things in it. That is a stronger piece of legislation. It's more durable. It won't be overturned or changed because you did take the time to listen and bring people together. Sometimes when I hear that, how do we keep the individual conversations and move at the collective? We often think of the collective as only our group of people, the people who look and think and act just like us. And in fact, if you try to extend the collective and make that circle bigger, you get shamed from your own side. And I know that the people inside prison in this example did not care who I worked with. I have to keep them in mind first. And when I am dead serious about freedom and dignity for everybody, I will work with absolutely anybody who shares that goal. And that has to be the North Star, or that has to be the thing that keeps us motivated. Who are we doing this for? That collective keeps us motivated. And then we have to have a high tolerance in our individual action to take those risks that might not be popular.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say is that purism is dangerous in all contexts.
Yes.
Because it tends to be, the purist tends to see the world and life in very black and white terms, and that's never reality.
Yes.
And in fact, that is my biggest concern with the, in relation to the digital era, is that, to some extent, even the technological frame is forcing us to look at the world in binaries. It's only in the digital realm, that you are asked to like or dislike.
Right.
Most of life is made up of something quite different, which is neither like nor dislike.
Yeah.
It's in that vast space in between. Intefaq, would you like to come in with any thought, any reflection, any dilemma that you would like to share? Okay. Nandini, are you there still? Nandini, would you like to pose a question or a thought?
Yes.
Go ahead, please. Nisha, sorry, Nandini has a little bandwidth issue, so her camera may not be on, but she'll be there. Go ahead, Nandini. So her camera may not be on, but she'll be there. Go ahead, Nandini. Sorry, Nandini, we are not able to hear you.
So my question was
sorry, Nandini, we are not. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that a lot of young people today, they get hopeless when they see these things keep happening to them. I'm sure that you must feel like that too sometimes. I'm sure that things happening around must affect you and must affect your optimism somewhere online. How do you then, bring yourself up, and how do you keep doing what you do? how do you stay optimistic in spite of all of what is happening around?
Yeah, I heard your question is the hopelessness that we're all feeling.
Yeah.
And how do we move
the hopelessness that we're all feeling? How do
Yeah. So, I have been struggling with this a lot over the last month. You can see I smile. I am very optimistic. I walk through life really with the attitude that, anything that's wrong, I can fix it. I'm just a fix it person. I have been this way as long as I can remember. And so, I realize not everyone's like me. I do carry around that optimism. And a lot of people come to me because they see that I don't feel hopeless. And they come and they say, well, what's the optimistic take on this? What is the better way to look at this situation? And they can usually count on me for that. But the last few months have been hard. I think after 2 years of living through this pandemic, after seeing the division increase and the violence increase, and after seeing our families even torn apart or our neighbors torn apart in our neighborhoods and our communities, it is hard. It is hard to stay hopeful. And I think a lot of young people in this country have just decided to ignore it all. If it isn't in their daily life, they're just living their lives and talking about sports or music. It's a coping mechanism. Instead of dealing with the pain and the hopelessness that they see, they are just, focused on something they can control or things that, aren't important. And it's hard to see because it is our young folks we need to change the world. They're the ones that create the future that we're going to live into. And so engaging young folks in all of our conversations in a way that is safe and in a way that really honors their experience is important. My children, I mentioned 17 and 14, they've lived through something at their age I could never even fathom. Myself as a teenager, having all of a sudden 2 years where we live, they didn't go back to school for almost 2 years. They were at home, very little interaction, and their entire lives just switched overnight. And now they're back at school for almost a year. They're dealing with kids' suicide rates are up, mental health issues. It's heartbreaking. And in fact, the things that are being offered to help them, they don't want. And so they're staying out of the fight. It's hard to see. My only take is what I said earlier. If we're determined to create a better future will come. And if we accept hopelessness, we will get a hopeless situation. And that's the way it's always been. Change comes, but not without a fight. And so we do have to stay in the fight. And I tell my staff on days when I feel hopeless, I actually tell them. I'm the leader. They're used to hearing me really show the path forward and tell them what we need to do. But when it's hard, I say it's hard. And just like my kids, when they need to do nothing but talk about sports or play sports, great. I will honor that. Take time off. Let your people take time off. We have to be in this fight for the long term. So if you need a day, a week, a month of rest, take it and then come back and determine to create a better future. And we really do need to love and honor everyone's way of dealing with it, especially for young folks.
Absolutely. Because the the larger context in which they are struggling with all these realities is actually unprecedented in human history.
Yeah.
I think there is no other period in human history where change and technological change and its effect on our lives, every day, every moment life, is as profound and unsettling as it is now.
Yeah.
What you were saying reminded me of an idea that I always throw around. Pessimism is for better times.
Pessimism is
for better times.
Aha. Yes. Yeah.
We don't have that luxury. Maybe, Nisha, in closing, maybe we could focus a little bit on, because actually you've highlighted it quite a lot, that, many of the things you were saying is what I call practicing nonviolence first upon yourself. which is all the things that you said, when the going gets too tough and you feel you can't cope, take it easy, step back. All the problems that you think need to be fought will still be there.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, day after, next week, next month. So that is one. And also, I think maybe there is a very real need to, in a sense, squeeze every last drop of joy out of whatever there is to be joyous about. I know that this is not an idea that gets discussed in the conventional discourse on nonviolence, but I can't help feeling that defiant joy, or if not joy, at least defiant cheerfulness, but not as an act, not as a pretense. But
I think you're right. I really do. Joy is so important. And what are we doing this for? Why do we want change? Why do we want progress? It's so we can experience that beauty of humanity, that there are amazing, beautiful, joyful, soulful moments, and those should be always celebrated. They have to be, because even in the darkest times in human history, that joy, that ability to be human together, that pulls you through. You cannot fight in the most horrific moments without that joy. It actually is quite important. Also, how are we going to attract people to doing it our way if it looks horrible and miserable and we're horrible and miserable? You can't be like, oh, my life sucks, I work all the time, and there's no joy in what I do, join me. That's a bad strategy too. But not as a pretense. I think that there is beauty in every moment, and we have to find it, and we have to celebrate it. So definitely celebrate your wins.
That's right. And also, I think I like to keep reminding myself about the physics of the human consciousness. I mean, there is a physics to, human behavior and human emotions. And I think one very major factor in that is that it's very difficult and tiring to sustain hate.
It's true.
Hate is a very draining and tiring emotion. So you want to maybe just close on that note by saying a bit about how you have seen this play out in your work, because I know you have a lot of experience with this.
Yes, you can't. Hatred isn't for our side. If we try to out hate the people who hate, we'll lose. And so part of one strategy, that deep love for all of humanity, has to be front and center. That actually is infectious. When you love, you cannot lead a country you do not love. You cannot lead a country if you don't love the people inside the country, all people inside the country. You have to love everybody in it. We are not countries that were meant to be only one thing. It is supposed to be this beautiful diversity of people, and that makes the country magical. It is supposed to. And instead, if we lead with love, we will find a country where everyone is welcome. And when you see the hate creep in, then you've actually lost. It means that they've changed who you are. Because we're on this side. If you are someone who is committed to nonviolence, or if you are on the side of progress and social change, or the way I describe it as freedom and dignity for all people, if you're on that side, it's because you weren't made to hate. And if you start feeling that yourself, it's because they have now changed how you think. And so that is a daily practice of centering yourself and making sure that you're coming from the place that's authentic to you. That unwavering love for people who are different than you is so important and so critical.
And I think what has become very clear in the past, say 5-7 years, and both in the US and in India, is that that people being different from you is not about is not always about ethnicity or race or religion. It can be about ideology.
Yes.
And unfortunately, um, there is a kind of a culture which has inculcated the idea that to hate someone for their ideology is okay.
Yeah.
It's only not okay to hate them for the color of their skin or the name of their religion or the language they speak. And but in fact, there's no difference.
I wonder, I've never thought about this before, except when you were saying it. I wonder, because we haven't healed the previous hate, the hate that was based on race and color of skin and religion and caste, because that type of hate hasn't been healed, it became easier to find more things to divide us on. And maybe if we go back to some of the original pain and divisions, it wouldn't allow us, if those have been properly healed, it wouldn't allow us to find new things to hate on. We'd have a little more roadmap of how to come together. I'm not sure. I was just thinking about that. Is actually this hatred on ideology just an extension of previous, of our historic problems?
Maybe. That is a very real possibility. The only complication that I visualize there is that, we do also, at least in India, I know the US on the race issue may be different, though there also, I think if we went looking, we may find some of these nuances. I suspect that what we had was a very complex mixture of the problem, both continuing and being healed at the same time. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if that was not there in the DNA of the society, parents like mine, and I know you mentioned that your father's family survived the partition.
Yes, my father, yeah.
Right. And my parents also came out. I'm much older than you, but my entire clan was displaced by partition. And yet, so I'm born 10 years after independence, right? And so I'm growing up in the 60s and 70s. Never, ever was partition presented to us as a story that required us to now cultivate hatred towards anyone.
Right.
On the contrary, the message, and it's not like it was being hidden from us. There were pretty graphic tales being told, even when we were children. And I must tell you, as a child, many of those stories were very frightening.
Right.
They are still frightening, when I'm past 60. But none of those stories carried the, overt or covert message that we are now required to hate A or B or C because they did it to us. And I think that this quality of large-heartedness and of depth, I think it came from a depth of being, mm-hmm. which there was no, there was no confusion about what was an injustice or what was a trauma. That was there was no denial. But there was a sense of, we are bigger than this.
Right. And so we've lost a little bit of that in this time.
Something. And I don't know if it's technology or it is, the political economy that has shaped up in the last 70 years. But maybe it is the atomization and the more intense alienation. Mm-hmm. That has made such large volumes of people vulnerable. I know, I'm sorry, we are running out of time.
When you're alienated, it's true. It's just making me think about this idea of belonging.
No, go ahead, but finish what you were saying.
Yeah, belonging is such an important human need that if we don't belong and we're isolated, then it's easy to use the strategy of divide and conquer. That is something that's been as old as time, that politicians in every country and everywhere and groups and tribes throughout the beginning of history, divide and conquer is such a tried and true strategy. And so if you are isolated, if you're not sure where you belong, if social media and everything else is telling you one thing, then it is very easy, I think, to do the divide and conquer strategy. That would be another way to look at it, because somebody gains when you
that's right.
When you use that.
Yeah. So that brings us back, therefore, to the importance of what you do. And thank you so much, and God bless you for doing the work that you do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back. And thank you for asking
No,
questions.
thank you for making the time. I really, really appreciate it. And all the best. Wishing you all the
Yes.
best. Bye, dear.
Thanks. Bye.
Keep in touch. Thank you all. Thank you for joining. And we now close this session of Ahimsa Conversations Live with our friend Nisha Anand from the West Coast in the USA. Thank you, and stay tuned for more such sessions. Nandini, you want to stop recording?
Recording stopped.